Well, hello and welcome to all of you from wherever you're joining us today. My name is Luke Kuchenberg. I am a founding partner and senior wealth advisor here at Forum Wealth Advisors, where we exist to make life better for our clients and those in our community. And this is our 2022 Tax Planning Strategies webinar. It's a time where we want to look at where we're at today, what we think may happen through the course of 2022 and in these years ahead, and most importantly, what are the action items? What are the strategies? What are the conversations that we will be having with you, our clients, to help you navigate the tax environment that we have ahead of us? So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. For all of our compliance and attorneys out there, no seminar or presentation would be complete without a disclosure page. So here's this. In all honesty, and most importantly with all this, is to understand we are not CPAs, we are not tax professionals. Nothing what I say today should be construed as tax or legal advice. But what I will advance is that as your wealth advisors, as your financial planners, we are tax aware. We are tax aware for you. And again, as we help have these conversations around the planning that we can help mitigate taxes and help your financial planning. So to our agenda, you'll see I'll talk about ordinary income, investment income, itemized deductions. We'll spend some time on estate planning, and then lastly, some legislative updates that we see coming down, maybe into 2022 and perhaps not all the way till 2025, but I'll talk about that more towards the end. So ordinary income, we're going to take a look at where we're at today with the expanded lower federal tax brackets from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we saw pass in December of 2017. So as you'll be able to see from here, we do have these lower and expanded tax brackets, right? And here in the United States, we have a progressive tax system, meaning you tax rates go up, the higher your income goes, you get taxed at a higher bracket. And last fall, I think we all thought we were going to see some meaningful tax increases. We got the bill, I think it was in September. And it looked like not only income taxes, but capital gains was going to change. We did see some potential changes in the estate planning. And as we sit here today, none of that has become law. In fact, the House passed version of that Build Back Better bill didn't have some of those provisions in it. And now it looks like it's not going to happen. So here we sit today again, top bracket at 37% for income taxes. But I'll tell you, don't sleep on that. Don't sleep on that. As we sit here today, that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act bill that was put into place in December of 2017, that will expire December 2025 without any further legislation. So what are, in that shorter time frame here, in these next number of years, what are some strategies that we can use with these lower, not only income tax brackets, but also some of these lower capital gains tax brackets as well? Individual income taxes, that conversation wouldn't be complete without mentioning the ACA taxes here, Affordable Care Act taxes, sometimes called Obamacare. You'll see on Medicare, you'll see the 0.9%. That's actually for active forms of compensation, wages, compensation, like I said, self-employment income if you own a small business. The net investment income, that 3.8, that's on passive forms of income, something from interest and dividends from your investments, net capital gains, annuities, rents, things like that. Again, passive income, not earned income, not active income. Important to note right here, these two forms of taxes, the 0.9 and the 3.8, these are for your married filing jointly incomes above 250,000, modified adjusted gross income above 250,000, and for single filers above 200,000. Only two forms of income that aren't subject to ACA that I know of, and that's going to be your municipal bond income or municipal securities income and retirement distributions. Those are not privy or subject, excuse me, to the ACA taxes, either the 0.9 or the 3.8. Okay, I get it. Great, Luke. Those are some interesting facts, but what does that mean? Okay, and that's one of our larger jobs here as your advisor, is to say this is the tax environment we're in. Now, what do we do with that? What are some of the strategies we can use? So take a look here at some of these multi-year tax planning considerations for individual taxpayers that we might have. So in a higher tax year, in a year in which your income is higher, these are some of the things that we might discuss and or utilize for you as a strategy. We want to increase or discuss the increase of your retirement plan contributions. Can you get more into a 401k, into a 403b or 457, those qualified plans that you have through your workplace? If you own a small business, it might be either starting a simple IRA or a SEP IRA, or seeing, can you fund those at a higher level? Can you defer more of that current income that you're earning today in this higher tax year into that plan and shield that from current income taxes? We want to look at accelerating charitable giving. That is a little bit more nuanced with this current tax bill, with the rise in standard deduction. We don't have as many itemized deduction filers anymore, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So there's a strategy we use with charitable giving called bunching. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but we want to do more charitable giving or accelerate charitable giving in a year that you have higher income. We want to recognize capital losses. Can we use some losses to offset some of that higher income? We want to avoid, if possible, capital gain recognition in a year that our tax brackets are already higher. And lastly, we want to, if possible, defer retirement account distributions. If we are not yet to age 72 and we are required to make distributions from our traditional plans, either a 401k or most often a traditional IRA, if we're before those years, let's defer that. Let's not take those distributions if we can, and accelerate, or excuse me, even have more income in this higher tax year. Conversely, in a lower tax year, what are some things that we want to look at there? Well, kind of almost the opposite of what I just mentioned. We want to accelerate income recognition into a lower tax year. Again, those lower expanded brackets, there's room there. There's room there. And so we want to accelerate income there. One of the examples this slide uses here is non-qualified stock options. Some of you may have some of those, and that's something to look at. One of the things it mentions at the bottom there, considering Roth conversions, for a lot of clients, that would probably be one of the first places that we would discuss as a strategy for recognizing or accelerating income into this year. As you might imagine, that traditional IRA money never been taxed. Uncle Sam wants his tax money on those withdrawals. And so if we look at a Roth conversion, converting dollars from that traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, you're going to have to recognize that income in that tax year. And if you're in a lower tax year than you traditionally are, that might be something to look at. That might be something to look at. And I'll talk a little bit about Roth conversions in just a minute. Another thing, in a lower tax year, we want to defer charitable giving. We want to do that in years where our income is higher. If you own a business, we're looking at delaying business expenses into those higher years, recognizing capital gains. So I know many of us have a disdain for taxes, right? We don't want to pay them. We hear from clients a lot, and I get it. But again, we're at some of the lower brackets we've ever seen. And you'll see here in just a few minutes, I'm going to talk about capital gains. Those brackets under 517,000, 15%. So if we can be smart about how we pay taxes and the amounts that we can pay taxes, that's a win. So we want to recognize capital gains in a lower tax year. And the other thing we want to look at is potentially Roth conversions. And I have a separate slide. I'll talk about that in a minute. As just a reminder, life events that always trigger an extra look at tax strategies that may be available to us. If there's a marriage, if there's a divorce, if there's a birth of a child, if there's a death, retirement, or self-employment. Those are some areas that we want to look at, some other tax strategies that may be available. A quick look at retirement account contribution limits here for 2022. Traditional IRA, Roth IRA, didn't see any changes. Regular contributions for those of us under age 50 are still at 6,000 for a maximum. Catch-up contribution, meaning 50 or older, you can add another 1,000 to that to make it 7,000 for the year. You'll see on a traditional IRA, there's phase-out ranges for both the traditional and the Roth. I'll talk about that in just a second, what those really mean. The 401k, 403b, that got a small boost actually. 20,500 for a maximum for that if you're under age 50, and a $6,500 catch up for a max of 27,000 if you're over age 50. Simple IRA, SEP plans for the small businesses, again, small increases there. One of the things the slide does not talk about is something called a defined benefit plan. That's something that may be available to some of you out there that own a small business or are executives. That may be an option to defer more salary, more compensation. So those are some of the things that we want to look at from that, and some of those things that we want to utilize when it comes to deferring taxes and getting the benefits of the current tax code. So a little more detail into the two types of plans. So there's a traditional type plan, traditional IRA, traditional 401k, 403b, etc. And then there's the Roth version. Now, for so many years, there was only a Roth IRA. But in these last, 10 to 15 years, we have seen the Roth 401k option become an option that's out there in our workplace plans. And I want to talk about those because this is a common question we get. It's a common question we get of, what do I do? How do I look at it? So let me first take the IRAs, because sometimes there can be some confusion. And that's what the top part of this slide is talking about, is the IRA, traditional IRA, Roth IRA. Sometimes there can be some confusion on this. And so let me talk just a few seconds about that. You can always, with earned income, must have earned income for both a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. But you can always make a contribution to a traditional IRA. What's in question is whether it's deductible or not. Is it deductible for your current income taxes or not? And you can see from this top part of that slide, traditional IRA is fully deductible as long as your income is under $109,000 for married filing jointly. Then you can see there's a partial deduction if you're in what they call a phase out limit, which is 109 to 129. And then above 129,000, it is a not deductible. You can still make the contribution to the traditional IRA. It is not deductible though for your income taxes, and therefore might not be a reason to do that. Might not be a benefit in doing that. Conversely, the Roth, it really is a question of, can you contribute or not? And that's up to income. You can see here, you can make a full contribution, that's $6,000 if you're under age 50, $7,000 above age 50 with earned income. You can make that full contribution all the way up to $204,000 married filing jointly of what they call modified adjusted gross income. Partial contribution between 204 and 214. And then above 214,000 married filing jointly, you cannot make a contribution to a Roth. Cannot do it. And so that's some of the common confusion you might see there. Now, at a higher level, again, the question we get a lot is, Luke, what do I do? I have a traditional option, I have a Roth option. Let's take it from a qualified plan, a 401k at work. What do we do? So one of the things you want to look at, and again, every situation is a little bit unique, but some of the things we want to look for is if you're in a higher income year, if you're earning higher salaries, maybe you're later in your career, maybe you have done well in your career advancement and your income's higher, that current deduction that a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA is providing might be valuable, might be really valuable, knowing that your income's probably higher today than it may be in retirement later. So that the asset of that current deduction today, not paying taxes on all the money that we are deferring, that could be powerful. And so if you have a higher income, or you're in a position where you think your income will be lower than it is now, it'll be lower in retirement, that traditional type planning and getting that current deduction, that may be the route you want to take. On the opposite side of that, if you're in a lower income now, maybe you're just starting out in your career, maybe you feel like you've been a great saver, right? Maybe you've done a good job stewarding assets and becoming an investor over time. Income's still on the lower side, especially for these lower income tax brackets that we have today. And you think, no, I think I will be in a higher income tax bracket in retirement. I think it's worth it for me to look at giving up the current deduction today and gaining the tax-free nature of those Roth distributions in the future. And so that's one way to look at higher income, thinking you'll have a lower income in retirement, that traditional style and that current deduction may be more valuable. If you're in a lower income or due to the investments that you have in place and you believe that you'll be in a higher tax bracket in the future, that Roth style or that Roth option may make more sense. So here, I said a minute ago, I'd come back to this Roth conversions. This, again, a big question we get, and it's in the media all over, talking about Roth conversions. So let's talk about it a little bit. And it kind of goes hand in hand with what I was just talking about a minute ago. So you can see from the slide, leaving a traditional IRA, if you want to maintain tax deferral as long as possible and exchange that as you need to take that money out, or as you're going to be in that lower income tax bracket, leaving in a traditional IRA makes sense. If you need those dollars into retirement, a lot of clients do. They do almost all of their saving in traditional style 401ks, and they're outside of Social Security. This is the lion's share of where their income comes from. They need those dollars, right? And so it may make sense to leave that in a traditional IRA. On the other hand, converting it to a Roth, what are some of the things we look at? Well, are we in lower income tax years? Remember from a few slides ago, where it makes sense to accelerate some income into this year at these lower tax brackets. That can make sense from a Roth IRA standpoint. One of the other things that you want to do is the benefits of a Roth conversion is traditional IRAs have required minimum distributions that start at age 72. At age 72, you're required to by the IRS to start taking distributions from your traditional IRA account. If there's some appeal to not having to do that or to do less of it, Roth conversions can make sense. A great window to do that for Roth conversions a lot of times is if there is a end of work, if you retire in your late 50s, early 60s, but before age 72. So between 59 and a half, when you can start taking money out of your IRAs, and age 72, when you have to start taking money out of your traditional IRAs, there's a great window in there when income may be lower because maybe you have retired or you're working part-time now, not full-time. Again, that income's lower and you're to a point where you yet don't have to take out of your traditional IRA. So from age 59 and a half to age 72, that could be a really good window to look at Roth conversions. So let me sum it up by what I feel, what Forum Wealth feels that's important to really look at from a Roth conversion standpoint, because we have a lot of these conversations, as you might imagine. But at the end of the day, a lot of clients get to the point of where they're actually making the conversion, and those taxes are due. You take money from your traditional IRA and convert that to a Roth, those taxes are due in that tax year. And so we model this for clients, as you might imagine. And when the client sits down to actually write the check to the IRS, we see them say, I think I'll leave it in the traditional IRA. It's understandable, right? We all, human beings, we have something that's called loss aversion. I love behavioral finance. It's one of the things that Chicago Booth School of Business, we talk about behavioral finance, and loss aversion is one of those things none of us like to lose. Current markets are no different, as we're seeing right now, right? But when they look to have to pay those taxes today on that Roth conversion, a lot of times they decide not to. And so here's the thing. There's really I believe, three things that need to be in place that make it a strong case for you to look at a Roth conversion if it makes sense to you, okay? Number one is that you're in that lower bracket, right? There's some tax arbitrage, as a nerd like me would call it, right? We're able to convert that money in my opinion at 24% bracket or lower. We're able to do that, okay? So that you're in a lower bracket today. That's requirement number one. Number two, you have the cash to pay the taxes on the amount that's converted. It doesn't make any sense if you have to pay taxes out of the investment that you're converting from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. You must have the cash on hand in the bank, in my opinion, and in the advisors here at Forum Wealth to pay those taxes. You want every cent of that conversion to go to that Roth and grow. And number three is important too, is that you have the time to let it grow inside that Roth IRA. Ideally, you don't need this money, okay? You don't need the money for retirement. This is a legacy piece for you. This is something that you're saying, hey, great, on the amount that I've converted to this Roth IRA, number one, I don't need to take required minimum distributions. That's a great benefit for me. I don't have that requirement. But most importantly, this is a legacy piece for me. This is going to go to my children, my grandchildren. They won't have to pay taxes on that. And I think that's really the third requirement. So again, the three requirements that we believe that are really should be in place for looking at a Roth conversion. Currently in a low tax bracket. 2, you have the cash on hand to pay the taxes of the amount you convert from that traditional IRA to the Roth IRA. And 3, you have time to let the money now compound inside that tax-free vehicle in the Roth IRA. Health savings accounts. I cannot leave this section without mentioning this. This is kind of the best deal going. I call it the triple benefit, right? So with a HSA, again, health savings account, 3 benefits. 1, tax deductible contributions. You can put up to $7,300 in there for a family. If you're over age 55, you can add another $1,000 to that, $8,300. There's tax deferred growth. You don't pay taxes on that money while it's in there, and tax-free withdrawals for your healthcare expenses in the future. There's nothing else like it. Nothing else like it. One of the requirements, though, why not everybody has these, you must have a high deductible health coverage plan in place, and you cannot be enrolled in Medicare. So we are seeing more and more clients have the ability to have these high deductible healthcare coverage plans. And if you do, these HSAs can make a lot of sense. They can make a lot of sense. And one of the biggest areas that I love about them is, number one, you can invest these dollars and they have the potential to grow inside that tax deferred account and be invested. 1. 2, it's not like a flex savings account where it's use it or lose it, right? I have a flex savings account. At the end of the year, I have to have used those dollars. Every once in a while, there's a little provision, a little bit can roll over. But for the most part, we have to use those dollars in that tax year for healthcare. HSA isn't like that. You can continue to defer those dollars out and not use them. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits here. One of the things we talk about with clients and actually talking about those action items, those strategies, it's in if you have a high deductible healthcare coverage plan in place or have the option to, and you're somebody that aspires to retire before age 65 when Medicare starts, healthcare and those premiums have become a very large planning point. Become a large expense. There's a lot of clients who are financially ready to retire at age 62, let's say, and then they look at the healthcare premiums they have to pay, whether that's on the exchange, the healthcare exchange, or another private plan, and they say, Luke, I don't dislike work that bad. I don't want to pay $1,800 a month, right? Well, if you're able to have an HSA in place, one of the recommendations we make a lot of times is max out that contribution, but don't use it. Use that higher income you have right now in these peak earning years to pay your healthcare costs if you can, right? And most can do that, and leave those HSA dollars in there to grow, and then use them at the onset of early retirement in what I call the gap between early onset of retirement before age 65 and age 65 when Medicare starts. It can be a great strategy and a great tool to lower income with that tax deduction, no income phase out. Okay, doesn't matter how much you make. And let that money to be able to grow for you and pull out tax-free later. Making an adjustment or switching gears a little bit to investment income, like the federal income tax brackets. These capital gains brackets expanded in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that passed, that went into effect basically in 2018. And you can see there, income married filing jointly up to $517,000 in the 15% bracket. Very, very attractive rate. And you can even see, you remember the ACA tax at 3.8% net investment income tax. Again, that applies to incomes over $250,000, $200,000 if you're single. So that can raise that rate at 15 to 18.8, or if you're in the 20% up to 23.8. Again, for where we've been in the past, those can still be very attractive rates. And I'll say it again, and understand and appreciate that clients and all of us have a disdain for paying taxes, right? We hear a lot of times, I paid taxes along the way when I made it, and now I pay it again on my investments. But there is some real strategy and some real wins in using these lower brackets to help pay some of those tax, to help recognize those gains while we still have these. And again, I can't say it enough, don't fall asleep on this, because the Build Back Better bill that looked like was going through maybe isn't at this point. These current rates are set to expire December 2025. So we want to be having those conversations. We want to be perhaps in those lower income years, like I've said now a couple times, recognizing some of those capital gains and paying some of these lower income, or excuse me, some of these lower gains taxes while we can. A little bit here on recognizing capital gains and losses. They offset each other, right? And the one mention I do want to talk about right here is with the current market action that we've seen year to date, really. I mean, we hit a market high on January 3rd. Since then, the markets have been choppy, right? There may be some opportunities here this year for some harvesting of what we call capital losses. And I won't get into great detail with that today, but it's something we look at. It's a strategy that can be valuable. It can be a valuable asset to have that loss. It offsets gains that we may harvest, and that loss can be carried forward indefinitely. So just if we don't happen to use those losses that we harvest this year, we can carry those forward. So we've had some great last couple of years. We haven't had any losses. We've had some clients call over these last 3-4 years and say, boy, I could use some losses to offset some gains, and haven't had any. Markets have been great. Account strategies and models have done very, very well. Okay, but when we have these opportunities like we may have this year, that's something that we'll be looking at, harvesting capital losses to offset gains now or into the future. Let's talk about our kids and grandkids for a second. Avoiding kiddie tax. 2 opportunities to do that I'll talk about here. So what is kiddie tax? Kiddie tax applies to children that are under 19 or 24 if they're full-time students. And this is on taxes above $2,300 of unearned income, meaning from investments. So once they have unearned income above $2,300, that's going to be taxed at the parent's tax bracket. Okay, so one of the ways that we see this is years ago, accounts were very popular. They were called UTMA, or Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. We call them custodial accounts. And one of the things that was popular at the time was moving some of mom and dad's money into these accounts, into Junior's name or little Sally's name, right? And this was one of the ways the government said, hey, kids have unearned income, meaning investment income above $2,300. We're going to tax that at your bracket. We can't have you shifting assets into the children's name to avoid taxes. And so that's where the kiddie tax came from. It's back. It went away for a little while, and now it's back. So what are some ways that we can look to avoid that? Well, 529 plans can be one of the ways. If we're looking from an education type goal, this provides tax-free growth and distributions for qualified educational expenses for kids or grandkids. This was something when it came out about 25 years ago was very, very narrow in what it could be used for. It could be used for post-secondary school tuition, right? So university, college, etc. And in these 25 years, you've really seen that expand, really get a lot more liberal in what you're able to use that 529 money for. Even actually at this point of allowing qualified distributions to tuition to grades K through 12 up to $10,000 a year. And some other expenses related to college, to tech schools, etc. But one of the other things that's out there is a 529 has another benefit. And one of the things I'm going to talk about later, which is estate planning, which is by giving money to the 529 plan, especially from a grandparent perspective, you're removing money from your estate. And so what the 529 plan, it's an interesting benefit is it provides front loading of annual gifts. So right now you can put up to $16,000 in there without any gift tax, right? That's the current law. But a 529 plan allows you to front load that up to 5 years. So you can put $80,000 into a 529 plan. Your spouse, likewise, could do the same. And now $160,000 has been removed from your estate and into these 529 plans. So that's something we may be looking at as some of these estate tax rates may change in the future. Again, I'll talk about that in just a minute. They also provide a small income tax deduction if in the state that you live in, that could be a benefit for you. So 529 plans are definitely something we want to look at. Roth IRAs are another one. You have to have earned income here. So child or grandchild would have to have earned income to be able to make that contribution to a Roth IRA, but that's something that's out there as well. A little bit different than the 529, but another way to avoid the kiddie tax. So talk very briefly here about itemized deductions, and it's only because there's not money left. The standard deduction effectively doubled when we saw the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act bill pass in effective 2018. And so very few people itemize anymore. You can see the standard deduction for married filing jointly is now at $25,900, single $12,950, little bit additional deductions if you're older than 65 or a legal blindness. You can see though on the right hand of the screen, not many itemized deductions left. You have medical expenses above 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. You have SALT or state and local income taxes. Those are capped at $10,000. This is an area, if you watch some news, you see the political parties squabbling quite a bit about some of these higher taxed states aren't happy with this SALT cap. They call it at $10,000. But again, that's one of the itemized deductions. Mortgage interest is there, but it's capped at the size of the loan. And charitable gifts, and I'll talk about that in a minute, are limited as well. And that tied to a few slides ago where I talked about bunching. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit and how we can help increase deductions when we want to advance some charitable giving. A word on state income taxes. So here's a current look at where state income taxes are sitting. Wisconsin, that's where we are, where a lot of clients are, 7.65. Clients that are in Minnesota, 9.85, in Iowa, 8.53, some of the higher ones in the country. But this is a look. The biggest thing about this is since COVID especially, we've seen a lot of what they call COVID migration. You've seen a lot of movement from states like California, some of the states in the Northeast, to states like Arizona, Texas, and the biggest winner of the migration sweepstakes, it's not even close actually, has been the state of Florida. And it's to really understand what's the tax code in your state, and what is it where you're moving to? We hear a lot of times, especially as you might imagine, living up here in cold Wisconsin in the upper Midwest, we have a lot of clients who make the move or winter down in Florida, eventually maybe buy a home there. And I hear a lot of times, 6 months, 1 day, got to be down there 6 months, 1 day, can be a resident. Not so fast. That 6 months, 1 day is not written anywhere in any type of revenue code ruling. There's quite a bit more to it. And there's some other nuances to look at as well. I'll look at in just a second. But it's just to take a look at where you're at and understanding what those are. You can see you want to take the proper steps when relocating. Relocating can make a lot of sense, and not just from a tax reason. It can be a climate reason. And honestly, that's why most do it. Winter becomes harder as we get older. I love the state of Florida, the state of Arizona, in these colder months to go visit clients or to have a family vacation. But there are some real requirements that we need to look at, not just that 6 months and 1 day of residency. So let's take a second and look at that. So requirements to change domicile, you need to have a fixed residence in that different jurisdiction. Okay, let's use Florida as an example. You have to have a home there. You have to have the intent of abandoning or leaving the state that you're living in now. Okay, and there's some factors that help in that. There's some factors that help. Obviously, your physical presence, talked about it a minute ago, 6 months and 1 day, important, right? But so is, where are your bank accounts? Where's your driver's license from? Where are your business connections, doctors, dentists, voter? You register to vote in this new state, in this new domicile. Okay, these are all things that are important. And I mentioned it just a second ago. since COVID, these are some things that have taken on some increased scrutiny. These states, especially when you're moving from a higher tax state to somewhere like Florida, somewhere like Texas, it's going to give those states are going to give a little more scrutiny to why you're there. So you want to make sure that you have a fixed residence there, and you're doing some of these other factors. Again, having vehicles there, registering them in that state, having a driver's license, registering to vote, having your bank accounts there. Those are things that you want to look at. The other thing that you want to look at as well before you make a move is any transactions you have coming up. There are some states, Wisconsin's one of them, as you see on the left-hand side, states with reduced taxes on capital gains. There's also some taxes with some states that have reduced taxes on retirement income. And so you want to really look at this. You want to coordinate your relocation. Are you selling a business? Are you maybe in the middle of a Roth conversion? These are things that need to be looked at. So again, relocation makes a lot of sense, and not just for tax reasons, but you want to be really prudent in your planning and in your strategies around that, not only to take advantage of the tax benefits that are there in your current state, if there are some, but also what are they in the state that you're moving to? And let's make sure the timing is right. Let's make sure that timing is right. Switching gears to charitable giving. It's on the rise, which is great to see. Actually a record in 2020. We don't have the numbers yet for 2021, but I would think it probably hit another record. And some of this has to do to the responsive effects of COVID-19 and helping out there. You may see a bump this year due to the crisis going on in Ukraine. There's no doubt there's been a wealth effect of it from rising portfolio values, and we're honored to have been a help in that with clients with market highs that we've seen over these last number of years. There's been some significant what we call unrealized capital gains that we're able to gift to charity, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so we've seen this rise, and our goal here is to be proactive. What we find a lot of times with charitable giving is it can feel a little bit reactive. We can sit at the end of the year and think, oh, I wanted to give a little bit of money to the church. I wanted to give a little bit of money to the Wounded Warriors Project. I wanted to give a little money to the university that I used to go to school to and graduated from, or whatever other cause you feel passionate about. We find it can be a little bit reactionary. And our goal as your advisor, again, in being tax aware, is being proactive with that conversation. What can we help you do to be able to do that? And it's not about giving more money. It's about the money that you are giving. Can we save you money on that through some of the tax code? Can you still give the same amount, but do it a little bit more efficiently, right? And that's something that we'll want to take a little bit of a look at here. So I think I mentioned now a couple times something called bunching. Luke, what is bunching, right? So it's you'll see here example top and bottom of giving the same amount of funds, okay? Same amount to charity. You'll see here in the example up top, charitable donations in 22 through 25, 8,000 per year. You can see with income and property taxes, mortgage interest, and charitable donations, total itemized in this top example would be 24,000. Not enough. Makes more sense to take that standard deduction at 25.9. And so you can see the actual deduction for years 22 through 25 over on the right is 103,600. Okay. So now conversely, the example below, let's be proactive. Let's look at what do you want to give, what organizations, under what timeframes, et cetera. And can we do it a little bit differently? Can we bunch those donations into every other year and therefore increase some deduction? So let's take a look at that bottom example. You can see here nothing's changed with the amounts over time, right? Same 10,000 for income and property tax, same mortgage interest. We can see here charitable donations, we made a change. Not on the amount, still gave 32,000 over those 4 years, much like the example above, but we bunched it. And so instead of giving in 2022, we did not. We bunched the donation into 2023 and did both for $16,000. And then we again did not give any in 2024 and bunched it again in 2025 with both. Both 8,000 were given in 2025. And so you can see those years that we bunched those donations, we were actually able to itemize. And at the end of the day, we were able to increase over that 4-year period our actual deductions up to $115,800, or increased it by $12,000. It's a real asset. It's a real savings. And again, it's not about giving more, especially if that's not the goal. It's about saving more money with the dollars you're already giving. And one of the things that we're really passionate about here, there's a term we use here a lot at Forum called giving while you're living, right? That there's no doubt at the end of our life, there's going to be an estate. And for many, many clients, most clients actually, that's to go to children. But there is some that is part of that is for charity. And there's some clients that don't have children and all of it's going to charity. But what are some things that we can do while we're here? What are the things that we want to be a part of, that we want to see those organizations and we want to be a part of that donation, that legacy, if you will. And it's about putting and having discussions around matching your values with your wealth. And that's something that we are passionate about here. We're passionate about here. Donor advised funds. This is a tool. It's a tool that can be used like a lot of tools. It's not right for everybody. But donor advised funds, or DAFs, as sometimes they're called, can be a great and powerful tool especially for gifting long-term appreciated assets and investments we have in a taxable account, not an IRA, that have grown in value, that we're able to then gift. And we can gift that outright to charity, like the example before, or we can gift those to these donor advised funds. And so what are some of the potential benefits of that? Well, contributions to a donor advised fund are tax deductible in the year that they're made. So it can make that bunching strategy, I talked about a slide ago, it can make that a little bit easier if the client today doesn't know exactly where they want those dollars to go, right? But they know they want to take advantage of the bunching. They know they want to take advantage of increasing their deductions. Again, the second point, facilitates bunching of deductions for the maximum benefit. It avoids capital gains on the donated long-term appreciated securities. That's great. The client does not recognize any gains on that transfer. Appreciate those dollars that are gifted, they can continue to appreciate inside that donor advised fund, and that's not taxable. The contributions removed from the donor's estate. And so there's a number of benefits there. Again, they're not for everybody, but they may make sense. And again, as we may see changes with estate planning, tax rates in the future, these may become something that we use a little bit more. But that's perhaps an introduction to donor advised funds and why you may look at them for use, why they may be part of our discussions. I'm going to spend a little time here because it's one of my favorite strategies for those clients that are charitably inclined, and many clients have traditional IRAs where it makes sense, right? And so what are these? There's called qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs. These are donations that you make once you reach 70 and a half. Okay, that used to be the age to do a qualified charitable distribution at 70 and a half used to be coupled with when required minimum distributions started for those who have a traditional IRA. So it's pretty easy. Well, a couple of years ago, with a bill called the Secure Act at the end of 2019, those got decoupled. And so now required minimum distributions, I talked about those at the beginning, from traditional IRAs or traditional plans like a 401k or a 403b, start at age 72. But you can do these qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs, at 70 and a half. If you think they made that more confusing, you'd be right. They did make that more confusing by separating those two, but no, that's the case. And these can be done from your IRA or an IRA that you inherited, but you must be 70 and a half to do it. And It's not the year in which you turn 70 and a half. You must be 70 and a half or older to do one of these. Okay, so that's something else that we look at and talk through with clients. But let's look at some of the requirements for it. The donation must be made directly from the IRA to that nonprofit, to that 501c3. Okay, it cannot be made to you and then you write the check to the charity. Can't do that. It's got to go direct. So one of the benefits we try to provide here for clients is telling a client, just let us know where you'd like the money to go. We'll speak with that charity. We'll speak with the professional at that church that handles that. And we'll get that information together. We'll get the forms together. You sign them and it goes directly there. No questions asked. Okay, so that's one of the things, must be made directly. And it cannot be made, interestingly enough, I just talked about donor advised funds. These QCDs cannot be made to a donor advised fund. They cannot be made to charitable remainder trusts. Private foundations are not allowed. Really what it's coming down to is no self-interest, right? The IRS is onto that. You may remember, I'll make a little example of it, but any of Seinfeld fans that are out there, it was in the later seasons, but George Costanza, there's a famous episode where he decides he wants to be a philanthropist. And it was over the Christmas holidays. And so instead of giving gifts to his teammates at his office, he gave them that a donation has been made on their behalf to the Human Fund. Okay, really it was going to him. Can't do that. Can't do that. So it has to go to a nonprofit, a 501c3, church, universities, and in many nonprofits. Wounded Warrior Project is one that clients work with quite a bit. Okay, so it has to be that. Again, individuals 70 and a half or older with traditional IRAs or inherited IRAs, active plans are not eligible. 401ks are not eligible for this. Active simple and SEP IRAs are not. Okay, maximum of $100,000 per year for each of you. And it may satisfy all or part of your RMD, but it could exceed it. So an example, client recently, we were having a discussion. He did not have a lot in a traditional IRA. Most of his retirement income comes from pensions. And so he wanted to give some money. And his required minimum distribution was $4,000. And he said, I'd like to give $5,000. Can I do that? Absolutely. You can give $5,000. Actually, I can give up to $100,000. So you can give that required minimum distribution or part of it or more than it, as long as it doesn't exceed that $100,000 per year. So that's one of the things that we really utilize here for tax strategies, and a way where it meets the client's values and their wealth. It's a great meeting point for that. One of the other smaller things to think about, I think when you hear things like this with charitable giving and that type of thing, donor advised funds, etc., is, well, I have to be giving a lot of money to have that. And we hear that a lot about estate planning, and I'll talk about that soon. That's not true. One of the things that we actually look at a lot of times with these qualified charitable distributions from traditional IRAs is a conversation I just had recently. Clients were here and they give every week when they're at church. And she said, sometimes we give $20, sometimes $50, sometimes $100. Sometimes at Christmas we give $500. And I said, well, what if you were to add all that up and get an average of what you give every year? And then whatever that number is, do it as a one-time QCD from your IRA. You have to take required minimum distributions anyway. Why not give it with pre-tax money? It's a win for you. You're still giving it to the church. Church doesn't pay taxes. It's a win-win all around. The client was elated with that. And again, this was not any larger amount. This wasn't tens of thousands of dollars, but it still made the effect the client was looking for. And that's the goal. How can we, like I said it a few minutes ago, not necessarily give any more, but save money on the money we're already giving? And that's again, something we're always looking to do. Estate planning. So one of the things here, this point has slipped from not only a lot of clients' radar, but from a lot of advisors' radar as well. And it's simply from the fact of, very quietly, those estate tax rates, you can see this estate and generation skipping tax exclusion has very quietly gone from about $1 million up to $12 million. each. So a husband and wife today, or spouses today, can leave 24 million to the next generation with some estate planning work without estate tax. And so this is, again, for many reasons, because of that, because of the amounts falling off a lot of people's radars. I'll say, like I did at the beginning with income tax rates, don't fall asleep on this. This has been talked about, of bringing it down from the 12 million down to 5 million, down to 3 million. Okay, it's been talked about, hasn't shown up yet, hasn't been passed. And unlike some things we see from an estate tax standpoint and from a capital gains tax standpoint, this estate number, there's bipartisan support there for that to come down. So we want to be prudent. We want to make sure that we're having these conversations about what these rates are now, what they might be in the future, and if they do come down to 3 million, they do come down to 5 million. There's a number of you that have some planning to do, and what we don't want that to be is in a scramble, in a reaction. So let's be having those conversations. There was an elder care attorney who I loved, and he always used to tell me, I can make the perfect estate plan if you can tell me 3 things. Number 1, when are you going to die? When are you going to die? 2, what are you going to be worth at the date of your death? And 3, what's the tax laws at that time? He said, if I know those 3 things, I can make a perfect plan. And I get his tongue-in-cheek part of that, right? But that is what we're dealing with. We never know exactly what that future holds, especially with where we're at today. And will it be 3 million? Will it be 5? I don't know. I don't know if any of us really do. But if I were a betting man, I would bet it's not going to be 12. I'd bet it's going to be lower. So let's be having some of those conversations now. Some other advanced estate planning strategies, and even not so advanced in point 1. We always, once a year, once every couple of years, want to be reviewing existing documents. We want to make sure our beneficiaries are up to date, especially after life changes, birth, death, marriage, divorce, etc. We want to make sure contingent beneficiaries are on there as well, meaning after that primary, if something were to happen to that primary beneficiary, right, who gets it then? A lot of times you'll see a spouse and then children named as contingent. We want to make sure those are on there. We want to make sure we have updated durable powers of attorney, durable healthcare powers. Wills are in place. We want to understand the merits of a living revocable trust and perhaps some other advanced trust work. And we want to understand the impact of any residency changes. I talked about that in a few slides ago. 2, we want to understand the impact of portability. This is more advanced. And so I won't speak a whole lot about it, but we want to understand what those are, especially if we see those rates come from 12 million and drop down, especially drop down significantly. And we also want to know what advanced strategies might be out there that are there if we see those rates come down or your net worth exceeds the amounts that we're at today. Some other strategies that might be out there, asset titling strategies, and some other types of trusts, credit shelter trusts, grantor retained annuity trusts, that GRATs that you see down there. And then there's a few others that are out there as well. So we want to be, again, it all comes down to, we want to be having those conversations, make sure that we're being proactive and that we're matching your values, matching your goals and your desires with your wealth. I'm going to wrap up with legislative updates. Looked like, again, this fall, as of mid-September, we were going to have quite a few from a tax and estate planning standpoint. It's not looking that way now. Again, even the House passed version of Build Back Better, passed, I believe it was November 4th, didn't have a lot of the language of the original bill that came out in September out of committee. Then it went to go to the Senate and it kind of died there. So not sure. There's a lot of uncertainty if anything will get through with everything that's going on at this point and before midterms come up this fall. So we'll keep an eye on it for you like always and let you know if there's adjustments we need to make. You can see there some of the things that might still be part of a Build Back Better agenda. But again, increasingly we're seeing that not happen. But one of the things that we are really paying attention to is there was an original Secure Act that was passed in December of 2019, and it changed the retirement landscape pretty vividly for the first time in probably since 2006. And so with that came a number of changes. One of the bigger changes clients and us as advisors here at Foreign Wealth dealt with is non-spouse beneficiaries for IRAs. There were some changes there that were made. And so what we've seen very, very recently here at the end of March, actually, March of 2022, a Secure Act 2.0, Secure Act 2.0 was passed by the House. And with it comes some further enhancements to some of that retirement legislation. A couple ones that were new, very bipartisan. Don't see that very often today, but very bipartisan. Again, trying to open up and continue to open up access for retirement vehicles to everybody. Trying to increase some limits, excuse me, increase some limits to what retirement planning can be for those individuals. But one of the things we're really, really paying attention to is some clarity on the distribution options for those non-spouse beneficiaries. And again, it's confusing. When the first bill came out, the Secure Act, regular Secure Act in December of 2019, it looked at non-spouse beneficiaries for the most part. When you inherited an IRA, so let me give you an example. Adult child inherits an IRA from parent passes away. It looked like starting 2020 moving forward that there was no required minimum distribution for that child. It was something called a stretch IRA prior to that. But with this new law starting in 2020 moving forward, there wasn't going to be any required minimum distribution. And you had 10 years to get that money out of there. Might not have to take any in year 1, 2, or 3, but in year 4, we decided you would take out a quarter of it. Or if it was a Roth IRA and it's tax-free, let's let that money compound and take it all out in year 10. And so we had already started talking to probably some of you about some of those strategies that were there. Now, all of a sudden, that's come into question. As we got towards the end of 2021 and into this year, the IRS has done a couple double takes on that and has kind of said, well, no, there still is required minimum distributions. At the same time, there still is a 10-year rule. Again, if it sounds confusing, it's because it is. It's confusing. So what we're hoping is that we see clarity. They have, as you might imagine, from people like myself, other advisors, and many in the community, the IRS has received a lot of communication, a lot of comments about that confusion. And I really think we're going to see some clarification with that. So again, where I'm going with all of this Secure Act 2.0 that's sitting on the Senate's desk at this point, and it still has a ways to go here before we get to the president's desk for signature. But we're keeping an eye on that and really hoping to get clarity if you are on that non-spouse IRA distribution option. So I'm going to leave you with this. If you inherited an IRA as a non-spouse in 2020 or since, and you haven't taken any distributions from that because you thought we were under the new 10-year rule and you didn't have to take one every year, just hold on that. Don't go and take distributions now. Just hold on that. And again, hoping to see some further clarification as we get towards the end of this year. I believe if the IRS does, in fact, say no, that required minimum distributions still have to happen, they'll provide a grace period for us to do that. So hold on that if you've inherited an IRA as a non-spouse over these last 2 years, and we'll get to that. With that will close our 2022 tax strategies. As always, if there's any points that I talked about here or any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Myself, Tyson, Christine, Rick, Jesse, and any other member of our team. That's why we're here. We're here to help. And if there's any other points that are pertinent to you that I did not talk about today, that you have questions and or concerns, make sure you bring those up as well. Until next time, thank you, everybody. Take care.